Hello, campaign diary number 2. We've played two sessions since the last time I did a video. Andrew is enjoying it very much. Kasumi, not so much. She doesn't seem quite as interested, but I'm trying some things to get her more involved. They're working more or less. Andrew is continuing to play his human paladin Proton, and Kasumi is playing her half-elf druid Shara with her rat Lovely. When they left off last time, they had just killed a Nephilim shaman in the sewers of Silvar, killed a bunch of worms, and allowed workers to come back in and finish the sewers. That was where we left off, and they gained a level. So at the start of the next session, Andrew decided that he wanted to go back to Fort Exile, and he wanted to explore the rest of the Arrival Caves, because they left the Arrival Caves without exploring everything. They were trapped in there to begin with, and so they decided that they would just leave. And then, I guess sometime between when that last session ended and the new session started, he decided that he wanted to go back and finish exploring it. So they took a trip back to Fort Exile. They rolled for a random encounter and didn't encounter anything. I decided that they'd meet some guards on the way. They haven't had any random encounters along the road, and I explained that the roads are well patrolled, especially in this area, part of the cave, this starting area where all of the new arrivals show up. And so they meet these guards, and they exchange pleasantries, and they go along their way. They get back to Fort Exile, and they had a little role-playing encounter with a character in the inn named Warwick. Warwick from the video game is an NPC that asks the players to find her sister. She's a new arrival to the caves, only been there for a few days, but her sister went into exile down in Avernum years ago, and she hopes that she's still alive now that she's down in Avernum after running afoul of the Empire. And so Andrew agreed to look for her, and Warwick explained that her sister Anastasia was a blacksmith on the surface and might be a blacksmith down here. So they have that going on now. Andrew goes back to the greeter and asks if he can go back in the cave, and they let him in. So they do some exploration in the cave. Now, I wasn't expecting them to do this because last time they said they were going to do anything, they were going to go up to Fort Mellow. So they explore the caves, and I just pull some encounters out. I sent them against 2 Violet Fungus, and I'd never run Violet Fungus before. They were fine. They have very low armor class and only a few hit points, but they can attack 4 times. So I was worried, but they handled it just fine. After defeating the Violet Fungus, gave them some treasure, had some corpses in amongst the roots. They finished exploring the caves. They ran into a rat swarm. They took care of the rat swarm. That one was interesting as well, because Kasumi, because she is basically using Produce Flame as her primary weapon, is able to do full damage to this rat swarm, whereas Andrew, with his longsword, and even Lovely, Kasumi's animal companion, they're doing half damage. And it was a good way to get them to do a little bit more math than just adding simple numbers. Now they had to divide by 2. And they did a good job, and I was very impressed with Kasumi. She was able to, what is 5 divided by 2? She said 2.5, and that's great. So they finish clearing that out. They get a little bit of treasure, they leave the Arrival Caves, and they decide to go back to Silvar. On the way to Silvar, they roll for random encounters again. This time, they rolled a random encounter. And Andrew said that he wanted to fight. And when I started to describe this random encounter, he assumed they were guards. And I did this on purpose because they weren't guards, they were bandits. 5 bandits, actually. And one of the problems was that when they left that Arrival Cave, and I asked them what did they want to do, they said they wanted to go to Silvar. And I asked them, are you sure? Are you going to do anything else before you leave? And they said, no, we're just going to get back on the road and go to Silvar. So they were missing spell slots. They were kind of damaged. And so they entered this fight not fresh. And they rolled really well. They had a good combat. They were able to incapacitate 1 of the bandits. They killed 2 of them. And the other 2, seeing their allies die, and they died spectacularly, the other 2 just book it and run. Andrew, and I'll elaborate on this later from the next session, Andrew is taking a lot of prisoners. So they bandage up the one that was unconscious, and he was making death saves. They heal him up, stabilize his wounds, and they carry him to Silvar. When they arrive to Silvar, they turn him over to the guards. The guards put him in jail. I wasn't expecting that. And so then they arrive in Silvar. That was the end of that session, and that was when they leveled up. They were level 3 at this point. So a few days pass, and one day passes, and we have another session. This session started with, they didn't go look for Warwick's sister. I think they may have forgotten about that, and I'll remind them. They took notes. It doesn't matter. In this session, they decided to get supplies. Andrew wanted to get more rations because the trip to Formello is about 5 days long. It's about 114 miles from Silvar. So they prepare for the trip. They gather some stuff, and Andrew says that Kasumi needs new armor and needs a shield, which in their last session, Kasumi got hurt. Kasumi got hurt really bad. In fact, I think she went down once, got to negative hit points, and Andrew was able to run over to her and use lay on hands and bring her back up because she was already hurt from the arrival caves. So the first thing that they did was they went to the shop and got Kasumi a set of hide armor and a shield. So Kasumi's armor class is now 15 and not 12. So she's a bit more durable. They decided to get the rations, and in the game, the person that gives rations in Silvar is described as a very nervous woman, constantly looking around. And I didn't find them in Avernum Escape from the Pit, but in Exile, there's a secret door behind her shop where there are some goblins hiding. And so I described sounds coming from it, and the shopkeeper being nervous and looking around and being really jumpy and complaining about the noises. And so Andrew took that bait, and they decided to go and explore and go searching. Andrew's background is an urchin, and he has proficiency in stealth. So he always stealths, and the breastplate doesn't inhibit that. So he stealths up, and there's a set of rocks that kind of hide a little alcove, and as they approach, they hear some bickering, but Andrew couldn't understand it. But Kasumi can, because Kasumi chose to be able to speak Goblin in character creation. So I described to Kasumi what she hears, and Kasumi relays it over to Andrew. They show up and see these 4 goblins, and I ask them what they want to do, and Andrew says that he's going to charge in and attack. And so he says, I'm going to run in and I'm going to Divine Smite. Just right off, just rush in, Divine Smite, deal everything. So he rolls his dice, and he rolls a 1. And I like it when he rolls 1s, and when enemies roll 1. The critical fails and critical hits are great because because Andrew and Kasumi both really like it. It adds a lot of tension, drama to the fight. So what I decided was that now normally the Divine Smite, you hit and then you expend a spell slot and deal damage. But he was so gung-ho that he rolled all of his dice. He rolled his attack, he rolled his weapon damage, and he rolled the radiant damage for Divine Smite. And so I decided that this roll of 1, was that he went in gung-ho blazing and just burns everything up, and the divine energy flows through him into his blade and melts his sword. And he loved it. He thought it was hilarious. So his sword is melted. Now he's holding this empty handle of this former longsword. And so he says that he's going to retreat back to Kasumi. So Andrew is now Sans weapon. He does have other weapons on him, so he does fall back to that. But then it's Kasumi's turn, and Kasumi sends Lovely in. Lovely starts attacking one of the goblins and deals some damage, and she produces flame and throws a fireball at one of the goblins, and that goblin goes to 0 hit points. No, that goblin goes to -1. They have 7 hit points each. She rolled an 8. And so this goblin goes down. And when this goblin goes down, Andrew asks me if it's dead. And I said, well, yeah, kinda. Because again, monsters, we don't usually worry about death saves and things like that. But he said that he wanted to heal it and capture it. And so I was like, fine, I'll track the death saves, and I will do this from now on. He wants to do it. If they don't go to -10, I will track death saves, unless there's some reason why not. So this first goblin goes down, and I have to start rolling death saves for it. But that was the end of their turn, and the goblins go. The goblin fails its first death save. Actually, this is important. The goblin fails its first death save. Then the other two, well, the one that's being attacked by Lovely starts attacking this dire rat that's hanging off of its leg, deals a little bit of damage. Then the other two run after Kasumi, Shara, Kasumi's character. And so these goblins attack. Andrew still has his shield, so he has the defender attribute in the paladin class, and so he gives disadvantage to one of the goblins, but both goblins still hit, deal some damage to Kasumi. The next round, Andrew gets out his sword. I don't require that to be an action. He just pulls out his short sword, and what he does is he runs through these two goblins. And I explained to him, if he passes through these goblins, he will provoke attacks of opportunity, and they'll attack him. And he said, and he thought about it for a bit, and he said, I don't care. I'm going to run through these goblins. I'm going to go to that goblin that's dying, and I'm going to use Lay on Hands to heal 1 hit point and stabilize him. So, okay. So, Andrew's character... kitty. So, Andrew's character runs through these goblins to go Lay on Hands. Now, I described how they love the critical fails or critical hits and critical misses, and they never hurt. I'm never going to have them, hurt each other with their critical misses. Just maybe ruin their weapon or have it drop out of their hand or something that is not super detrimental but gives some tension. And that gives tension. But for enemies. So I describe what's going to happen, and I roll for these goblins, and I roll a 3 and a 1. And Andrew and Kasumi both started laughing. And so the first goblin misses, overextends, and I say that the second goblin also attacks and also misses, but accidentally hits his goblin friend. And so the goblin basically does his attack to the other goblin. Goblin takes some damage. They both love that. Andrew runs over, then that's their reaction. Andrew runs over, spends a point of Lay on Hands. That goblin is unconscious but stable. His wounds close up, he's no longer dying. Combat continues. Excuse me. Lovely continues to attack the first goblin. Still not dead, but very injured. Kasumi is still fighting this other goblin. Deals some damage, doesn't kill it. The goblin's turn. The first one's still attacking the rat because the rat's attacking it. So that combat's going on. One of the goblins attacks Kasumi. Kasumi's character Shara. The other goblin turns and goes after Andrew's character. Because of how spectacular they missed, that one is angry and goes after him. And so it runs after him, and it attacks, and it misses. And so I describe it that this goblin rushes up and comes down and hits his back, but it doesn't penetrate his breastplate and just clangs. And that was the last move until the next turn. And then Andrew attacks, and he rolls like a 19. And he divine smites, and so he just kills this goblin that just attacked him. Lovely kills the goblin that it's been attacking, and Kasumi is able to take down the goblin that she's after. So now they've killed 3 goblins, incapacitated 1, healed it. Andrew carries him over to the inn. They pay for a night at the inn. They tie him up, and then they revive him. They bring this goblin back up and wake him up. And this is where I did something that I think Kasumi really liked, and I think is how I'm going to engage her. Kasumi speaks Goblin, Andrew doesn't. And so Andrew would ask a question, and it would force Kasumi to ask the question again. And it was a nice joke for her. Andrew would say, ask them what they're doing in Goblin, and Kasumi turns to me and says, "What are you doing in Goblin?" She thought it was hilarious, and so everything she said, she would say in Goblin. She would repeat it back. She would repeat it back verbatim, and she loved it. And I would reply back to her by writing it down on a notebook and showing it just to Kasumi, and then Kasumi would have to relay that to Andrew. And so that was really engaging her. So I will have to do more things like that for her. But the whole encounter was fine. So Andrew, of course, standard fantasy, is under the impression that goblins are evil. And these goblins are evil. They're not good. They're not neutral. They're evil. But because of the language barrier, the way that I would give it to Kasumi, these goblins were yelling. It's like, "What are you doing? Let us go." He asked what they're doing or why they were doing it. Why are they stealing from this shopkeeper? And the goblin's like, we're taking their food. We got to eat. Goblins got to eat. And this made Andrew upset with himself. He was like, "Oh no, these goblins just are trying to survive, and we just killed them." And so Andrew heals this goblin up, and they let him go. They take him outside of the city walls, and they let him go. And so I didn't tell him this, and I'll tell him in the next session. But Andrew's character will be awarded an inspiration point for that. He is playing a paladin. Shut up, kitty. He is playing a paladin, and he is playing the actual paladin. He's not gonna. I mean, he stealths around for tactical advantage, but he takes prisoners if they aren't killed outright. If they're wounded, he takes care of them, and in the end, he just wants to do the best for everybody. So it's entertaining to see that this is how he plays his first game of Dungeons and Dragons. Next session, at the end of this session, they healed up again. They just had this combat. They didn't do much, but they had this combat, and it used a bunch of resources, and there was a bunch of role-playing, and it actually took a little while. And so they rested up again. They got supplies. They got some more water skins. They got everything ready to go. Andrew bought a new sword, and they started the trek to Fort Mellow. I'm going to put up my map, and so they started in Fort Exile, and then they went to Silvar. And now from Silvar, they're making the trek over to Fort Exile, and then they're going to make their trek north to Fort Mellow. Before they reach Fort Mellow, though, they're going to stop at Fort Dovno, and Fort Dovno is where they're at currently. When they arrived at Fort Dovno, Andrew said that he wanted to figure out what was going on. And in Fort Dovno, they are under attack. Not active attack, but the humans of the Eastern Gallery, which is where they're at, are in conflict with a group of Nephilim that have a fortress here in the Eastern Gallery and are currently constructing a new fortress north of Fort Dovno. And so Fort Dovno is worried about this, and the Captain Johnson of the Guard lets Andrew know this. He also lets him know that there's an old abandoned fortress that's been taken up by bandits. So Andrew decided that they're going to head to the Nephilim cave that is currently being excavated and being turned into a fortress north of Fort Dovno. And they know from the captain, because the captain sent patrols and stuff, that it is being excavated by goblin workers. And Andrew, after having this encounter with that first goblin and interpreting him saying that they were just after food as the goblins are not evil, thinks that these goblins are slaves to the Nephilim, and he wants to go and liberate them. So it's going to be great. It's going to be great. So that's what they're going to do, and then later he says he wants to go and take care of the bandits in that old abandoned fortress. That's great. So I was actually worried about them going straight to Fort Mellow, And I didn't guide them to Fort Duvno. I showed them the map, and I showed them where they were going to be going. And Andrew decided that he wanted to stop here at this fort before they kept on going. So it's great. They're going to get some equipment, they're going to get some levels, they're going to get some experience before they take on the task in Formello. The task in Formello is to recover a golden necklace for the mayor, and this golden necklace is in a Nephilim fortress that is a legitimate fortress. It is a castle. It's going to require stealth. It's going to require stealth and possibly mercenaries or hirelings. We'll find out. But that was the sessions. Kids are loving it. In fact, and this is, I think, the best part, I can only run so often because I have to develop, what they're going to do. Andrew and Kasumi started playing on their own because they didn't want to wait for me. And so now Andrew and Kasumi, whenever they're not, playing outside, when it's nighttime and they can't go outside anymore, will sit down near me, near in this area, and they'll sit down on the floor and they'll take the Dungeons and Dragons stuff and they will make stuff up for themselves. And it's fantastic. They are not playing according to the rules, and Kasumi likes to be the game master. She likes being the storyteller, but she exhibits the bad habit of she wants to win. And so I need to figure out a way to explain to her that it's not fun for anyone when the dungeon master is just trying to win and tell her story and not letting any of the players tell their story. But, they've only played 3 times now, so it'll come. But that's it. If you liked listening to me babble about this campaign, please let me know what you liked or what you didn't like down below so I can adapt this for the future. And if you have any suggestions, I'm open. But yeah, that's it. Till next time, later.